And as I did that, I'm like, but why not? What do I have to lose? And I distinctly remember I kind of like did something sort of with my hand over the top of where, supposedly I had cirrhosis. And if you've ever had like a blood blister or like a blister on your hand and you feel it pop, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what a relief that blister popped. I literally felt my liver like pop. I was like, what the heck? The heck was that? But instantly this, like, I was consumed by this, like, it wasn't a thought, it wasn't an idea, it wasn't a feeling, it was an absolute certainty. Like, certainty is the only way I can describe it. That I had, in that instant, healed my liver. Like, it was totally healed.
Welcome to Get Yourself Optimized, a podcast full of secret knowledge that will enable you to reboot and 10x your life. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, author, speaker, online marketer, serial entrepreneur, coach, and a real geek when it comes to biohacking, life hacking, and lifestyle design. What if even life's toughest challenges happen for a reason? My guest today, John Ratliff, is living proof of the miracles that unfold when you embrace that perspective. A successful entrepreneur and managing member of Align 5, John has taken his pattern recognition skills far beyond business into the realm of spiritual awakening. In our discussion, John opens up about his shocking journey beating incurable liver cirrhosis through energy healing after doctors laughed at the possibility. He shares the divine intervention moment when a booming voice told him exactly how to help his daughter overcome a severe mental health crisis, a path that ultimately led her to become a water sports instructor at Sir Richard Branson's Necker Island. We explore the gifts hidden in struggle, the power of asking what's the lesson, and why entrepreneurs may be uniquely wired for both success and depression. John also reveals how communities like Genius Network and Maverick have brought life-changing connections at precisely the right moments for him. This conversation invites you to look at life's challenges through a more expansive lens and consider how even the hardest moments might carry the seeds of healing and growth. So without any further ado, on with the show. John, it's so great to have you on the show.
Great to be back.
So you were on Marketing Speak, and now you're on Get Yourself Optimized. So we're going to have a different kind of conversation than we had on Marketing Speak. We were talking all about things like EO and EOS, and build a business that is saleable. How to a lot of really cool businessy stuff. But we're going to get more into the personal development side of things and how to grow and how to evolve, how to get life lessons in every interaction, every challenge, etc. So first of all, I'd love for you to share just a little bit of a hero's journey story of how you got from where you are now, from how you got from the very beginnings to where you are now.
Yeah. So, I don't know if it's a hero's journey other than a slog, but just that's a joke. I'm just teasing. But so graduated college, always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, even from kind of a young age, and finished college, came home, kind of spent the summer with a buddy of mine who had also just finished his first year in law school. And he went back to law school in September, and I was kind of looking around and wasn't really doing anything. And my parents sort of said, yeah, you gonna work, or like, what's your plan? So I ended up in a commission-only sales job back in the mid-90s when this was a huge thing, selling wireless phone, cell phones that, the big giant ones that sat on the front seat of your car in a, giant bag. But so was successful doing that for about 6 months, and then realized I was an entrepreneur and had the bug. So I convinced the wireless carrier to actually give me my own license, let me open my own stores. I left the company I was working for. So opened a couple wireless stores, ultimately sold it back to that guy that I worked for originally. And then with the proceeds from that, started a call center company. So old-fashioned, traditional answering service style call center. It was just me in the beginning. So I was 24/7, 365. I'd sleep in between calls, which was crazy. And it really took kind of 4 or 5 years to get to break even and then a little bit of profit. And then I had a buddy of mine who was a CPA and had done a bunch of business debt borrowing for other companies doing acquisitions. And he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about buying other companies?" And we didn't have any cash, and I didn't have any wherewithal to buy other companies, let alone run the one that I already had. But he convinced me that that was probably a good idea. We got a banker that bought in, and it's a longer story, but we bought 24 companies between 2000 and it was probably '03 or 4. Yeah, it was 2003. So between 2003 and 2012, bought 24 call center companies.
Wow.
And then had a buyer come along, and in 2011 we ultimately sold to them in 2012 for a strategic multiple, probably 4 or 5 times what I was paying as a buyer on the buy side. So really a great outcome, tons of great arbitrage, and it's an amazing story. And then the investment bank that we used to sell the company, I ended up partnering with them, helped probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 transactions with other entrepreneurs through them. So I really have sat at a lot of seats at the table in the M&A process as a buyer, as a seller, as an advisor, um, short of having a law degree, kind of as the attorney as well, getting heavily involved in the legal side of negotiating. So I feel like that's all sort of prepared me to have a really broad base perspective of what, we like to think about as the full circle journey of the entrepreneur. So from startup to scale up to contemplate an exit, and even post exit, what am I going to do next? I just sold the company, and, now I have the paradox of unlimited time and choice. And what am I going to do next? So we actually help entrepreneurs kind of navigate that journey now through a company called Align 5. Yeah, that's kind of what brings us to today.
Yeah. So do you think that you'd be able to pull off what you pulled off back in 2005 to 2010, 12 time frame, buying a bunch of companies and then creating a roll up and then selling that today in the crazy times we're living in with AI changing everything? Seems like a new announcement happens every week that is mind blowing.
So it's interesting on that front. I actually was asked to come back and speak to the trade association users group for the um, industry that I used to be in, that segment of the call center space. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of concern in that world about, are we going to get disintermediated, and do we have to compete with AI? And, what's that all going to mean? And I actually am pretty adamant in my thought process around this that it's not about how the job gets done, it's about the job to be done. And if you think again about the call center world, you have an end user who has some need, whether it's they need to buy or fix or solve or question or whatever it is, and they need to get connected to the proper resource to basically meet their need. And today we do that through a combination of technology and people. And, years ago we did it with just people and a little bit of technology. And in the future, we'll probably do it with a lot of technology and a little bit of people. But the need doesn't go away. So when I look at, where the puck's going, the Wayne Gretzky quote, I really think about the job to be done, not necessarily how the job is getting done. So I believe if you're a call center operator, there's never been a better time than right now to be in that space. And, insert your industry here for call center, because the jobs to be done are going to still exist. You still need to connect the person with the need with the solution. And all that's essentially going to happen is the cost to solve those problems is going to go down. So hopefully either more margin or less human capital issues or whatever the side benefits are. And what I told everyone in that industry, and what I'm really bullish about, is they did the hard part, which was to create the 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 customers that trust them today to meet those needs and do the job that needs to be done. They've already built the trust, which is the hard part. So if they can bring a more technology based solution or a novel set of new ideas and solutions, they already have the customer relationships. So and we always think about companies as a collection of assets and capabilities. On the asset side of the world, the customers as a customer list or asset, that's not going away. What's getting amplified are their capabilities. So the ability to serve those customers maybe in more elegant or less expensive or more efficient ways, but they still have the customer relationships until they've, lost their trust and those customers go somewhere else. So for me, as companies evolve in this new technology based world, they should be thinking about how do I maintain customer trust and maybe even elevate it by serving them in better, more efficient, less expensive ways, not focus on someone else is going to serve them better than we can. We're going to be a really, really long time, I think, before. I think, there was a famous video from Clayton Christensen at Harvard. He was a strategy professor, and the video is called "The Job of a Milkshake," and it was essentially about a customer discovery exercise that they did for McDonald's, and how they found out that half of all the McDonald's milkshakes are bought before 8 a.m. And it turns out that commuters with a long drive to work that want something to do on the way to work are buying McDonald's milkshakes, and they had no idea that they were selling that many at that time of day and why they were. But he talked about the job of the competitor to the milkshake for McDonald's wasn't a Burger King milkshake or a Wendy's Frosty. It was, bananas, donuts, Snicker bar, cereal, anything else you might eat on that commute to work. And it sort of changed how they thought about it. And the job of the milkshake was to entertain the commuter. It's really well done, kind of how it's a 4-minute video. It's an easy watch, but I always think about what is the job to be done, and how we deliver it is just the vehicle. And AI is just going to amplify our capability around delivering for customers. So, and I get it, certain industries are going to be affected and jobs are going to be lost and won and people are going to get disintermediated. But if we just change our mindset a little bit about, at the end of the day, it's about connecting a need with a want, or a need with a capability to solve it, and how do we get more efficient at doing that? So I'm optimistic contrarian and all that.
I'm optimistic too, for maybe a little different reasons than what you were describing. I think everything is divinely orchestrated. It comes from God, and God is only benevolent, and thus everything is for the good without exception. If we can't see it at the moment, like if we zoom out far enough across multiple lifetimes, across multiple universes and so forth, and outside of time and space and to our eternal nature, then we can see like, oh, okay, this hardship that I went through actually was for my highest good, because it made me a more resilient, anti-fragile person, or it made me more empathetic, or more of a contributor to society, instead of kind of passively just writing a check to charity every so often, and that was it. So it's not easy to go through some of these challenges. And one challenge we were just having during this recording was I'm in Tel Aviv, and sirens went off, and you have 1 minute to get to the safe room, and I had to interrupt in the middle of your wonderful answer and say, I'm sorry, I have to go to the safe room. And but everything's a gift, everything's a blessing, everything is for the good. So you just have to see the good in it. And that's actually brings me to another point I wanted to bring up that we discussed before the recording, and that is the one question you always ask yourself.
Yeah, and it's ironic that, it's not ironic at all. It's, like you said, divinely intended. But when you can look at everything in life as a gift, and you may not understand, even in this entire lifetime, why it was a gift. But if you believe that, to your point, the universe or the divine or your spiritual, beliefs bring you exactly what you need when you need it, and it's your job to interpret it any way that you choose. And if you choose to interpret it as a gift, then there's a gift in everything. It does kind of change the perspective and I think the trouble that it takes to go through some circumstances and situations. If you're always, I love the reticular activating system in our brain that, what we choose to focus on is what we tend to see. And if you choose to focus on finding the gift in everything, you'll tend to see those things. If you choose to find the struggle in everything, you'll see the struggle in everything. So why not, if you have to go through the circumstance anyway, why not try and find the positive and the gift in it? And to your point, not always easy to talk about on a podcast, but not always easy in real life and practice. But
Yeah.
I think it's like anything, the more that you practice it, the more you kind of rewire your mind, I think the easier it is to see the benefits in different circumstances.
Yeah. So that one question you always ask yourself is, what's the lesson?
Yeah, what's the lesson? Why was I exposed to this at this point? What am I supposed to learn from this?
Yeah.
Or take from it, or see in it? Yeah, always.
Yeah. A similar kind of take on that question that I learned from my Kabbalah teacher is, why is this in my movie?
Yeah,
And I like
I like
that
that.
because it's a reminder that this is all illusion and not to take it so seriously, even though it seems quite dire at the time and you're just fully absorbed in the circumstances of it. It helps you to set your perspective a little outside of your normal, and then to see that there's a purpose beyond what might be obvious. So maybe there is no obvious lesson, but when you open yourself up to, this was placed in my movie, just like whatever movie is being filmed, the movie set is very precisely set up. Every prop is placed there with precision and intentionality. Nothing just randomly shows up. If it's a scene of a bedroom and there's a side table and a table lamp and a book on the table, these things are placed there with precision.
Yeah, yeah, and a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love to hear too that you have a Kabbalah teacher. I have several friends that are kind of exploring that as well, and I do think it gives you kind of an interesting frame around this idea that does it really matter the way we think that it matters, or is it there to serve a purpose for us that we don't quite understand yet?
Yeah. And what's that quote
Yeah,
from, I forget who, but it's like, you can't connect the dots except looking backwards.
yeah, I know. Yeah, right. You only see the patterns in reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Which, by the way, brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up at some point in this conversation. That is your incredible ability for pattern recognition. Tony Robbins talks about pattern recognition being so important. And then the next level of pattern recognition in his framework that he gives is pattern utilization. It's not enough to just recognize the pattern. Certainly, it puts you at a leg up kind of position against all the competitors and everyone else you're competing with, but it is not sufficient. You need to utilize the pattern and even preempt the next iteration of it. Like if you see a fractal, look for the next iteration before everyone else can see it.
Yeah, that would be the we talk about OODA loop, which is it's actually from the U.S. Air Force. It was a fighter pilot that came up with it originally, but the concept is that everything happens in kind of feedback loops in the world. And, if you start to understand the pattern of those feedback loops, you can get inside someone else's feedback loop or situations loop. And the faster you can iterate in there, you end up, with whether it's competitive advantage or insight or whatever it is. But OODA stands for it's OOBA, and the first O is observes. Just you want to take in kind of all the data that you can, but the really important key is with no bias. So everything we filter through a lens in the world tends to be filtered with our bias. So we don't make as optimal necessarily of a decision because we've got some bias around how we're filtering information. So in the OODA approach, you have to flush all that bias, just take in all the data. And again, probably not the best example, but maybe it is. Think about the fighter pilot. Where's my wingman? Where's the opponent? Where's the sun? Where's the clouds? Is it windy? Is the wind behind me, in front of me? All the parameters, but no bias about what any of it means until you move to the orient, which is this orientation, which is the second O. Okay, now I've taken all the data. Where do I fit in this pattern? Like, what's my particular role? What skills do I have? What skills do I think the opponent has? Like, now bring all your biases to bear. Bring all your past kind of pattern recognition. Get rid of the beginner's mind and now bring the master's mind, and then make a decision on what you're going to do. Are you going to climb? Are you going to descend? Are you going to fire? Are you going to whatever it is? And then immediately take action. And as soon as you take action, go back to observation mode again. Flush all your biases. Don't admire your shot. Don't stand there and like the basketball player that shoots a 3-pointer. That the good players admire the ball in the air, but the great players don't care where the ball is. They're immediately back to observation mode, flushed all their biases, and they're trying to figure out what to do next. And I think what's interesting about all that, I think the universe kind of works that way as well. But where we get tripped up, I think, as humans, is we assign our own time elements to things. We talk about karma, and you can call karma a million different things. And, the universe always delivers, but it delivers in its own time, not in our version of time. And so many times, I think when we talk about, what was the gift in that, we're time constrained. We want to see it right away. We go through a hard situation and we get onto the other side of it, and we immediately want to know, okay, what was the good in that? Why did that serve me? Well, that lesson might not get revealed right away. It might not get revealed, in our entire lifetime. But we want to assign this artificial construct of time to the universe and its, and its mysterious ability to deliver on our behalf. Yeah. So I think that's where, like, when you start to, like Tony Robbins says, play with the patterns and use them to your benefit, I think it's always time that gets us tripped up. So does that make sense?
Yeah. And if you think about time as part of the illusion, that means that you can be outside of time, and your eternal self, your higher self, is actually outside of time. And that means that you can imagine communicating with your higher self, who sees where things are heading because he is outside of time, and he can see that it's all going to work out in the end. And then you get this reassurance and certainty and gratitude for what you're going through, even though it's tough at the time.
Yeah. If you can just, everything in life is a gift, as a mantra. And again, easy to say, not easy to practice, but everything in life is a gift as a mantra, I think is, it's certainly a lesson I've tried to impart to my kids.
Yeah. And then a corollary to that, I learned from a rabbi, just, kind of randomly, but nothing's random, of course. So my wife and I, we went to a Shabbat dinner. We were invited to this rabbi's house for Friday night dinner. And at the end, as kind of on the way out, he was escorting us out at the end of the night. And he shared this little piece of wisdom that really stuck with me. And that is, everything is a blessing. It's just a question of whether that blessing has been revealed yet or not. So either it's a blessing that's a revealed blessing, an obvious blessing, or it's an unrevealed blessing. So if you want what most people would consider to be blessings, pray for more revealed blessings, because when you just pray for blessings, you get the storms too, because those are blessings that help you to grow. You might not want those, though, at the time.
A subtle but important distinction.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. Speaking of these storms and challenges, you had a health challenge we were kind of talking a little bit about before the recording. I'd love to go into that a bit and some of the solutions and takeaways and the gifts that came from that.
Yeah, for sure. So, in a long sequence of events, I think that, that led to this. But I believe incredibly strongly in the idea that, you know, energy that we hold inside, positive and negative, takes on a physical form. I think inside of us, and that's certainly not a new or revolutionary idea. Many have talked about that. I also believe that certain emotions get held in certain parts of the body, certain organs. Depending on who you believe or listen to, one of those most prevalent ones is we tend to hold anger in our abdomen, particularly stomach and liver. Um, and about probably I wasn't feeling well probably about 3 years ago now, and was nauseous in the mornings and just off overall, and was going through some stuff and kind of in a lower vibration from a overall mindset standpoint, and was a frequent drinker, not a super heavy drinker, but was a daily, a couple glasses of wine or a couple beers. Never really hard alcohol or anything, but my fair share of beer and wine. And all those things combined with my low health, it was physical, and I got some blood work back, and my concierge family doctor said, "Hey, we've seen some liver trends with you over the last couple of years that aren't great. I ran a new test. It came back really bad. I think it might be time to, see a specialist and maybe take a more active intervention in this." So, long story short, within the next 9 months I stopped alcohol, I was already probably 4 weeks into a dry February moment. So I'm like, well, I'll just stop. That's easy. I've already stopped. Um, so see the specialist, no alcohol for 8 or 9 months, whatever it was. Get the first MRI, and the results came back significantly bad. Liver down, irreversible liver damage, cirrhosis. I'll just say it was the diagnosis.
Mm.
And of course, my Western medicine liver guy said, "Well, you'll never fix it, but you can manage it." And I said, "Are you sure I'll never fix it? Because I don't buy that." He goes, "No, I'm 42 years. No one's ever reversed cirrhosis on my watch." And I said, "Well, maybe I'll be the first." And he laughed and said, "Yeah, I've heard many people say that." So I left, and
That's not a
he's
funny
not.
joke for your supposedly trusted physician
Yeah,
to laugh at. Like that's like,
yeah, and that's pretty much what it was. But I'm pretty competitive, so and I wasn't totally sold. I mean, I was not well for certain, but I wasn't totally sold that it was as bad as maybe the MRI and all the blood work showed it to be. Although in hindsight, it probably was that bad. So so that kind of set me on a journey. And I had a friend, her name's Jackie, who had probably 5 different times suggested that I listen to, not read, but listen to Letting Go by David Hawkins. I'm sure it's a classic in this space. So,
yep.
and I'd blown her off the first 4 times. So right after this diagnosis, we happened to be at Ben Richter, who I think you may know. He's a mutual friend of lots of ours, at his birthday. Jackie was there, and we were having a casual conversation. And she said, you still haven't listened to the book, have you?" And I said, "No, not yet." I was kind of telling her what was going on. She goes, "Why don't you listen to it and then let's have a conversation?" So I did. And the concept, it's a 12-hour audible. I can boil it down to one sentence. Don't hold on to negative emotions. That's pretty much the thesis of the whole book. But there's lots of anecdotes and stories and techniques and why it works and all the things. So I start practicing the letting go technique and let go of the anger and let go of all this negative stuff I was holding on to. And then I figured, why not take it a step further? I'll try and do some healing work, and maybe. And I've always kind of had this sense that, I maybe experience energy at a little more significant level than most people, but I've never like done any formal training with it or anything. It's just been a casual thing I've noticed over time. So I start doing what I guess I would describe as a bastardized version of Reiki. I don't even know what Reiki really is, but I was doing something to myself, and so
Well,
just
you may not know what Reiki is, but your higher self sure did.
well, it did, still does. So I start doing visualizations. Imagine golden light around your heart and push it into your liver, and using my hands to do whatever the heck they were doing, and um, and it was kind of like I wasn't sure it was working or not, but I was starting to feel a little bit better. I was vibrating certainly at a higher level. I like the anger was starting to dissipate. So, and I was still not sold on the idea that this was a permanent thing. In fact, I knew it wasn't. And so it was about 6 months later, after the MRI and the diagnosis and the event in the office. You'll never cure this; you just have to manage it. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a Friday night into Saturday morning, and I was actually in like kind of a more sort of energetic and giddy state. I couldn't fall asleep, and I wasn't sure why, but I wasn't bothering me that I couldn't fall asleep. And I was kind of doing the technique stuff, and I was sort of laughing at myself, like, "This is what are you doing? This is ridiculous." And as I did that, I'm like, "But why not? What do I have to lose?" And I distinctly remember I kind of like did something sort of with my hand over top of where supposedly I had cirrhosis. And if you've ever had like a blood blister or like a blister on your hand and you feel it pop, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what a relief that blister popped. I literally felt my liver like pop. I
Wow.
was like, what the hell? The heck was that? And but instantly this like I was consumed by this, like it wasn't a thought, it wasn't an idea, it wasn't a feeling, it was an absolute certainty. Like certainty is the only way I can describe it. That I had in that instant healed my liver. Like it was totally healed. And I'm like, well, that's not possible. Like I was thinking, I'm gonna like reduce the fibrosis over time, and things are gonna get, hopefully moving in the right direction. And I'm like, no, it's done. Like it's healed. So I was kind of like, all right, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. You're probably half crazy. Why don't you go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and see how you feel? So I opened my eyes the next morning. Before I even knew where I was like, I healed my liver. It's done. It's healed. So fortunately, I was 3 weeks away from my next MRI, and so I go to the MRI, and I was kind of joking with the tech, and I'm like, yeah, I'm supposed to have cirrhosis, but I don't have anything. You're not going to be able to find anything. She's laughing. I'm like a cartoon character to most people. She's laughing at me like, what are you talking about? So when were you diagnosed? And so we have this whole dialogue. So sure enough, I get in the MRI. I'm doing all the energy stuff, the golden light, and all the things, and I'm certain that I don't have any sign of fibrosis. So I get done, and they pull me out. And the way they do the MRI, they put this paddle on your like abdomen that vibrates. It kind of hurts actually, and it like sends shock waves into your organs so they can measure their stiffness when they bounce back. So she pulls me out, and she said, "When were you diagnosed with all this?" And I said, "Like 7 months ago." And I looked at her and I go, "You can't find it, can you?" And then I let her off the hook, and I said, "I know you're not allowed to tell me because it's against the rules, but and I know you didn't find anything." And she's like, "This is one of the strangest days I've ever had in this job." And she's laughing, and I'm laughing. So I leave, and I'm halfway home, and my phone rings, and it's her. She said, "Hey, are you still in the hospital?" I said, "No." She goes, "Can you come back?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "You can't find anything, and they want more pictures, right?" She's like, I can't say that." I go, "It's fine." I said, "Do I need to be worried?" She goes, "No, you definitely don't need to be worried, but can you come back?" So I go back, two more full sets of pictures, and the paddle and the whole deal. And so, a week goes by, I get the results in the portal, and no word from my doctor. He finally reaches out, and he's like, "Well, can't really find anything." So we set up a call. I get on the phone with him. He's
He
like,
sounded disappointed.
He's totally disappointed and he can't reconcile. He's like, clearly there was an anomaly in one or the other MRI. So there's, nobody could have those two results 7 months apart. And I go, well, I think I can. And do you want to know what I did? And he's like, no, not really. He wanted no parts of knowing what I did. So I laugh and I go on with my day. And I'm like, well, we'll find out in 6 months. Because, by the way, I'm on a every 6 months for the rest of your life MRI plan because of this diagnosis. So I go, well, I have another one in 6 months. So we'll see what that one says. But I already knew. So that last one was, I don't know, 4 months ago or so. And same thing, I get it back. Totally normal. It's on an F0 to F4 scale. F4 is incurable, F0 is no signs of fibrosis. And I went from F4 to F0, and then my next MRI was F0 again. So now now he doesn't know what to do. So 10 days after I get it in the portal, I don't hear from him at all. 10 days later, I get a very brief message in the Penn Medicine. I'm going to call him out because it was terrible. Penn Medicine portal. And it says, good news, period. No sign of fibrosis, period. Results below. That was the entire. Meanwhile, my primary care concierge guy literally wants to organize a parade because he's never seen this before and he wants to know everything that I did. And he's like basically high-fiving me through the phone. But the specialist, the liver guy, who just had his whole construct turned upside down, literally doesn't even want to know like anything about me, and he's pretty much disowned me as a patient. So, so that's my crazy story. And maybe it was all coincidence, and maybe it was an anomaly.
Not a
All the,
chance.
but
Yeah.
no, there's no chance. So yeah, that was my funny, and I was already signed up for the mind body connection is, I think, more significant than any of us can even comprehend, and so I was already in this camp, but now I'm so firmly entrenched in this camp, I don't think you could ever get me out.
Hmm.
And to all my doctor friends, including I have a brother who's a neurologist who likes to say, until I see a double blind study, none of this is, it's not scientific and it can't be real. To all of them, I say, if all of that were true, if the mind body connection didn't matter, why do you need to do double blind studies with placebos in the first place? Like the whole system is constructed around this idea that we need to trick people into thinking they took a medicine or they didn't because of the placebo effect. So clearly there's something there. So, all
Yeah.
right, that's enough on.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank God. Thank
Thank
God.
God.
That's
Correct.
incredible. And
Yeah.
what a gift, what a blessing, what a miracle. And some people are reticent to share incredible stories
Yeah.
because they fear the judgment, the ridicule. I just
Yeah.
randomly sat next to this older gentleman a few years back at a Genius Network annual event over breakfast, one of those big round tables where we go for breakfast. And I share some of my outlandish, incredible stories that, you usually don't share, but I shared them because I'm an overshare. And he's like, well, I got one for you. I don't tell people this, but I was in a grocery store. There was a guy in front of me in the line. I was waiting to pay at the register. And the guy turns to me and says, your mother wishes you a happy birthday and she loves you.
Wow.
And then he paid and he left. That's it. That was the entire conversation pretty much. And of course, it was this guy's birthday. And his mother had passed, and so there's no way he could have known. It's not like he had his
No.
wallet out. It
Nope.
was the guy in front of him.
I mean, say no more. You don't even have to like put a period at the end of that sentence. That completely. And I was the reluctant one that always made fun of, and I think it's part of my youth was I probably always felt that I had some sort of different connection or kind of energetic presence that, when you're a kid or a teenager or a young adult, it's probably terrifying and you subconsciously push away. I had my awakening moment, I guess you could call it, actually on Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands. And I haven't really looked back since then. And now, when you when you start paying attention and you understand the law of probability, the things that happen in the world are completely unexplainable by probability. Like, if you truly understand probability, it makes quantum entanglement, spiritual connection, spirituality, call it again whatever framework you choose to use. When you really dig in on probability, it makes it so easy to understand that all those things are real because the things that happen are impossible. So
Speaking
it's
of
just
another
great.
impossible, to survive diagnosis, do you know who Anita Morjani is? She wrote "Dying to Be Me." She had stage 1 a Hodgkin's lymphoma. She had she'd been in a coma for 30 hours, and if you hear or read her story, that it's like, how can you possibly be alive through all of this? And some of the experts in this field of this cancer contacted her and looked at the scans, looked at all the lab work and all the reports and everything, and basically validated that this is only a miracle and no other explanation is available for this. And it sounds like that's a situation for you. And for whatever reason, you got somebody who doesn't maybe believe in God, maybe doesn't, maybe he puts himself in that position of being his own God. If it doesn't come out of his mouth, then it's not real. Don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree with those things. And we never really got to the level of relationship where I truly know spirituality, but I don't think he's aspiritual. But I think it totally undoes everything he's been trained by science. And you know, and I see it with younger doctors as well. They're using really old models and mindsets, I think, to train medical professionals in the United States. And they've always been slow to adopt technology. I was a call center company operator, and we used to laugh that the last one to get the alphanumeric pager versus the traditional pager was the doctor. The last one to switch from fax to email was the doctor. The last one to go from email to text messages was the doctor. And I think they're so burdened and beholden to the scientific method that there's no room for any alternatives other than the scientific method, and that really locks you into a tight box. And I'm fascinated by, like, theoretical physicists have become some of the most spiritual scientific people in the world because they understand quantum entanglement. They understand that energy can transmit signals across time and space that we don't understand.
Yeah, outside of time and space, because it's instantaneous and breaks the speed limit of the speed of light.
Correct. And I saw a funny friend of mine posted a funny meme the other day. Basically said, we refuse to believe that we're spiritually connected, but we all totally believe in Wi-Fi, which is pretty when you think about it, right? I mean, yeah, what's we can have Wi-Fi, but you and I can't be connected energetically. It's a really dumb idea when you think
Yes,
about
it
it
is.
at that level. So
Well, I guess they'll finally buy into it when the Wi-Fi is connected to the Neuralink implants in their brains, and they're like, "Oh yeah, now we're totally connected."
yeah, I can explain it, so I'm gonna buy in. I know it's and again, if you understand probability, just the we've all been there, that you think of someone that you haven't talked to in 6 months and they text you in that instant. That's scientifically impossible to prove through traditional math. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And for that to happen once in a lifetime or twice versus like on a monthly or weekly, or in my case, often daily basis, impossible to explain. But it happens all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, a minor example, but yeah. It's very arrogant of us as humans to feel like we have any clue whatsoever about the broader universe and what's really going on.
Yeah. Before we switch topics off of the health challenge and your miraculous recovery and healing, I just want to mention that there's a special window in time every week, according to Kabbalah, and it is in the middle of the night on Friday night. It is specifically between midnight and 1 a.m. And people will wake up who are studying Kabbalah and, that are spiritual, religious Jews, wake up at midnight, and they will read the Zohar for an hour, at least an hour, and then go back to bed, because they know this is the window in time where their soul is accessing something incredible that isn't available during the rest of the week.
I'll have to ask. My oldest is interested in Kabbalah. I'll have to ask if this is part of his practice.
Yeah, my mother-in-law wakes up in the middle of the night on Friday nights to do. She doesn't read the Zohar as much as she reads Tehillim, which is just the Hebrew word for Psalms, by King David.
Yeah.
So she reads those, but that special window of time she's quite aware of.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask about it.
So I know we wanted to go into another, I asked if we could go into another topic that was another challenge, but in this case, it's with a family member, with your daughter. And again, an incredible journey and miraculous journey that you and your daughter are both willing for you to share on this show, which I'm very grateful for. So,
and a topic I think near and dear to lots of us. So the topic is mental health. You and I chatted briefly before we started today about. I really feel like and the math and the science is pretty clear. 7 or 8 out of 10 entrepreneurs really struggle with depression in some form at some point in their life. And I actually believe, and I'm a bit of a contrarian on this. A lot of people think it's genetic and some other things. I actually believe the reason that we were drawn into entrepreneurship in the first place is we have an outlier appetite for risk. But more importantly, I think we see inefficiency or incompleteness in the world, and our desire is to close those loops and create the efficiencies or complete things. So we find an industry that is not operating at its optimal level. Well, we're going to go in and change that. Or we find a customer group that's not being served properly. We're going to go in and change that. Like, we're always about optimization. So I believe we're always operating at some low level of dissatisfaction with the status quo. And I think it's that potential dissatisfaction that drives us towards, being dissatisfied and potentially causing some depression. And I think, that potentially we transmit, or I know in my case, I feel like I might have shared some of that dissatisfaction and mindset with my kids. And, they see things in the world that are out of alignment or they're not happy about. And, I think it causes dissatisfaction with them. And so with our daughter, she's an empath. She's definitely an old soul kid. And, I've had lots of people that, independent of one another, basically say to me, like, she was your grandmother in a past life, and like all sorts of like weird coincidence things with her. And I think her deep empathy coupled up with her, emotional growth as a teenager and even preteen teenager. She was dealing with a lot of very adult style emotions in the world and taking on a lot of adult energy and didn't have the ability to process it. And she also got Lyme disease as a little kid when undiagnosed. And all of those things conspired to create a mental health crisis for her that happened when she was 15, turning 16. And that manifested in the spring. And she had been, because of her Lyme disease and debilitation, she had been out of school from kind of the end of sixth grade. She missed seventh, eighth, and ninth and went back for 10th grade. And strangely tested into honors geometry in 10th grade, having not done seventh, eighth, or ninth. So she's got this innate sort of like, again, geometry is a knowing, not necessarily an intelligence thing. So she's got this innate level of knowing in the world, which has been a challenge for her as well. But so she went back in 10th grade. It was the spring of that year. She was, excelling in school, but struggling emotionally and still physically, some physical leftover effects from Lyme, as well as the emotional and psychological effects from Lyme. So she ended up in the hospital in acute suicide risk, 4 out of 4 suicide risk, in the spring of, that was 2021, I think. And, from that point, she ended up in an inpatient program. Don't ever, ever, ever send anyone you care about to an inpatient mental health program, no matter what, period. That was a disaster. So she spent 10 days there. When you get out, then you have to kind of figure out a step down situation, what's next. And, I will tell you, regardless of the amount of resources you have, the networks that you have, there are not a lot of good step down choices for teenage girls with acute mental health crises. Fortunately for us, through Genius Network, I had the opportunity to spend some time and a considerable amount of time in discussion with Stephan. He's written, 10 or 12 books on flow state. And his story, actually, he had Lyme disease and depression related to Lyme disease and was, in his own mental health suicide crisis. And his friends actually drug him out of the house and put him on a surfboard in the ocean. And he says, when he caught that first wave, that he'd kind of found his cure for his mental health crisis. And that was by dropping into flow state. And in flow state, you release, in their research, you release all the positive brain chemicals that you have at your disposal, literally all at the exact same time.
The other incredible thing about that story, because I've heard him explain it, he had no energy. He wasn't even able to stand up. So they had to carry him, place him on the surfboard, and they're like, "You're crazy for doing this. How are you going to even stand up?" And then he started surfing. It was incredible. Defies all the odds, right? It's like against all physical, natural laws, and yet here it is, a miracle happening in front of everybody's eyes.
Yeah, we had the exact same thing with Ken. She couldn't walk up 2 flights of stairs on her own, and 5 weeks later, so fast forward. So I'm standing in our kitchen. She's just back from her inpatient stint, and one of the beauties of being an entrepreneur and one of the beauties of leading the lives that you and I lead is we've seen so many things that we almost always have the answer, right? If I look at a situation, I always know what to do, always. And I imagine you do too. And it was one of those scenarios where I just didn't know what to do next. Like I was, and that was a really difficult thing as her dad to not have. And we had tried so many different interventions and medical treatments and IVs and this supplement and that, protocol. And to the point where she's like, "Dad, I'm not a science experiment. I'm your kid. Like, stop experimenting on me." But so I'm standing in the kitchen and she's got her head down on the island and I feel a smack in the back of my head to the point where I actually turned around and there was obviously nobody there. And then I heard this booming voice in my head, and it was not Stephen Kotler's voice. It was, I don't know whose voice it was, but the voice said to me very distinctly, I will never forget, "Get her on a kiteboard, you dumbass." Those were the exact words. And I thought for a second, I'm like, yeah, we were trying to find, I knew flow state was the way out. And we were talking about rock climbing and all this other nonsense. And I was like, oh, yeah, obviously. We have a place in the BVI. We have all the resources. And so I literally said to my wife, and we joke, I'm the thinker in our house, and my wife's the small thinker in our house. But so I said to my wife, hey, I think we should get her to the BVI and get her in the ocean and see if, we can get her. Because I'd been talking about flow state for years with them, and it didn't really land. So to my wife's credit, she's like, I think it's a great idea. So 72 hours later, we were at my place on Mosquito Island in the BVI. She had a private kite instructor, a boat, someone that we all know well, a name you would know, lent us all of his gear and his teacher and his boat. And she was having her first lesson. So we went from couldn't walk up the stairs, literally, to 4 weeks later, her instructor, who still works with her today and is still one of our closest friends, after 7 hours, he was exhausted at 2 hours, and he's one of the most fit humans I know. After 7 hours, he had to literally pull her out of the ocean and say, Ken's, you got to call it a day. Like, you've been in the ocean for 7 hours. So you're right. I mean, flow state really can change you, emotionally, spiritually, physically, but energetically as well. Fast forward to today. So she went through 5 weeks. At the end of 5 weeks, starting literally from scratch, she was probably one of the best female kiters in the BVI. Today, I can say definitively, her and actually one friend of hers, another girl who's another amazing story, are the best female kiters in the BVI. And because I love full circles, and this story has an amazing full circle end, she was actually hired, and she hasn't started yet. She's in the paperwork and permitting process, but she was hired by Necker Island, Richard Branson's Necker Island, to be one of their water sports instructors, kite surfing and other things. But yeah, so she will start probably in the early part of July on Necker as a water sports instructor, which is maybe one of the most coveted jobs in that career progression. And she'll be doing that as a 20-year-old. So pretty amazing story, and the ability to kind of, and I won't say think outside the box, but I created her step down program for her because we couldn't find one that we thought was at an acceptable level of safe and effective. And I really believe that when you think like that and you take that approach and you take matters into your own hands, the solutions start to appear. And it's easy to say, well, you had the resources to do it, but she did the work, right? She's the one that jarred herself out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning. She's the one that, bounded down to the dock and got in the ocean and didn't complain and let some guy that she didn't know at all, who, was probably pretty intimidating, teach her how to kite surf. And she did the work. So, but it's pretty amazing.
You got to give yourself credit though, too, because you could have easily have dismissed that voice in your head and that energetic slap upside your head and think, this is crazy. I'm not listening to this. This is just like, me being exhausted or I don't know, crazy.
Because we were all the things, exhausted, felt crazy, uncertain, unsure, lacked confidence in decision making. I was all those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate it.
So that takes courage to listen to that still small voice, or sometimes that booming voice.
It was booming, but it was non-traditional. That's for sure.
Do you get messages like that very often, or is that the only time?
No, I do a fair amount when I listen. I feel like I'm gut instinct wise, and when I'm quiet and I listen, a lot gets revealed to me. Unfortunately, I don't get quiet as often as I should, and I think a lot of it gets missed or misinterpreted or debunked in my head. So
Maybe you should get quiet more often.
yeah, that is 100% absolutely.
There's a book about that called Get Quiet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Elaine Glass, who's in Genius Network, she wrote it. It's Michael Fishman's partner.
Oh, I've met Elaine.
Yeah, her book is Get Quiet.
Awesome.
So you should get quiet more often. And
I'm a big fan of that idea.
yeah, I write in my Remarkable tablet every day. I've got this thing that is such a life preserver because I'm writing gratitudes to God, and that includes messages that I'm receiving, and so I'm getting more messages as I'm writing the messages that I'd already received. And so far I have 1,912 pages.
Is that 1912 days or some days?
No, I write a lot of pages per day. Depends on how much I'm dedicating to like I try to do like a half hour a day. If I spend more time, I'll get more. Sometimes I'm just more connected, and then I get lots more stuff coming in. Also writing about the things that I'm challenged by, and I write that I'm grateful for those. And I mean it because I know that there is a bigger picture at play, and God is only benevolent, and these are only for my highest good.
I love that practice. I think that's great. And to do it that consistently, I think, anytime we can find a anchor, routine, ritual, whatever it is.
It wasn't a routine. It was something I dreaded doing, writing in a journal. So I never did it for my whole life. What turned this around for me was I thought like it was a mindset shift. It wasn't like I just needed to start a tiny habit and then build on that habit stack and all that. Nope. It was a realization. And that realization was that I need to be showing my gratitude to God on a daily basis in a meaningful way. And that should be, why not that meaningful way be a gratitude journal? And then when my sister-in-law said, there's a whole book about thank you for the challenges by Rabbi Shalom Arush. That's not the exact title, but that's the premise of it. And then I decided, well, I should be writing not just about the obvious things that are blessings, but the non-obvious things too, and to really truly feel gratitude for those as I'm writing them down. And then of course messages come, and then I'm like, well, why don't I be grateful for those too, because those are amazing. And then more come in, so that it just kind of blossomed from that initial mindset shift around this is a way for me to respect and honor the Creator for all that He's doing for me.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very inspiring story, and I see some parallels, but I'm drawing some dots for me that I think connect as well. I have not the same practice, but morning pages from The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and the stuff that's come out for me while doing that. And I'm not a daily practitioner, but I'm probably a few times a week. And yeah, you go back and you almost wonder, where did that come from? Like that, why did I write that sentence? What was I thinking when I said this? And easy to see that it's downloading, not necessarily an original thought. So very cool to corroborate that story.
Yeah, we're all downloading, and we just don't attribute it to its source usually. Think, oh, that was just my idea, or that was just my stinking thinking. If it was not a very resourceful thought, but we're just antennas, we're just receivers tuned into radio stations, and those radio stations could be high vibration or they could be low vibration depending on where we're at vibrationally. We match we get matched to the vibration that we end up hearing in our inner hearing. and we think it's just our own thoughts. We need to wrap up, but I just wanted to also, just briefly, since we talked about Genius Network, kind of in passing several times, I know you're a Genius Network member and you're a Maverick member. I've had both Joe Polish and Yannick Silver, who are the founders of Genius Network and Maverick, respectively, on the show. And I'm curious why you're in both. I'm in both, of course, and that's how we know each other. But you're in both, and they're different. And I'd like to hear a little bit about why you're in both and what you see are the differences and the similarities, and you maybe a story or something too.
Yeah. So for me, it's about being around entrepreneurs and people that see the world through an abundant and maybe optimistic lens. And I think I get that from members of Genius and from members of Maverick, maybe in slightly different ways. I think Genius is a little bit more about, anything's possible in the professional world. And, if you apply curiosity, my two favorite traits for entrepreneurs are creativity and curiosity. And for me, Genius is all about leaning into those two ideas. You know, what are new, unique, novel ways to look at the world that other people aren't seeing? And it was someone recently said to me, a buddy of mine actually, talked about when you bring entrepreneurs together, we all have 3 or 4 playbooks that we use to solve problems, and I'm going to apply my 3 or 4 playbooks to pretty much any situation. You're gonna apply yours, and yours and mine might be similar, but they're obviously going to be different. Somebody else might have completely different ideas about solving problems. And when you bring groups together, invariably you're bringing all those different playbooks together, and the novel combinations of everyone's different kind of views can create something completely new and unique and exponentially bigger than either yours or mine in a vacuum. And I get that from Genius, and I get it from Maverick. I think in Genius it's a little bit more around kind of the professional financial marketing, like the mechanics of business. And I think with a heavy dose of personal, and a heavy dose of spiritual, and a heavy dose of Joe's, one of his favorite sayings is sell people what they want but give them what they need. And then in Maverick, I think it's for all the same reasons: playbooks and connections and networks and pattern recognition and peer group. And I believe there's an amplified power in being together, physically together in proximity, not even on screens. But Maverick skews to me more towards the anything's possible on the spiritual and magic side of the world, with a heavy dose of business. So they're kind of at not opposite ends of the spectrum. I think there's a ton of overlap in the middle, but one is more maybe professionally focused, and one, I'll just use a simple word and say, is more personally focused, with an unbelievable of overlap across the center. But that's and that's what I get. And Maverick, maybe a lot more people that are spiritually oriented. So I get their lens, and their lenses can be really unique on the world. Jackie, who recommended that I read Letting Go, came through Maverick. So I credit that recommendation and some of the things I learned there potentially with being some of the things I used to turn around a pretty dire health crisis. So that was a Maverick thing. I could have gotten that same recommendation in Genius. So there is a lot of overlap in the center. But Jackie used her playbook to solve my problem, and it was a playbook that I didn't have, that came at the perfect time in the divine moment to me, that then I had to take action on, which is how all this works. But had I not been in Maverick, I never would have had that framework. And it's interesting. I look at we're entrepreneurs, and we live on a really, really lonely island, and most of our peer group, friends, family, all the people we grew up with live in a completely different universe, and they haven't been exposed to all these different ideas. And I really get appreciation for when someone's going through a crisis or a challenge, or an opportunity or like their limited ability to navigate things. And I mean this, my family, friends, because they haven't been exposed to alternative ideas. They haven't been exposed to bigger thinking. They haven't been exposed to non-traditional playbooks. They struggle to solve problems that to me are so elementary and simple that they don't even rise to the level of like any mental strain to think about and solve. And for my friends and family, some of these things are like impossible to solve. And it's, we take that for granted, I think. And we don't realize it until we step outside of our, you know, isolated, lonely island to the broader picture. And I see people struggle with things in the broader world that are so fundamentally simple, but they just haven't been exposed. So I can't get enough patterns and exposure to different thought processes and ideas. That's why I do both. And all the things I've done in the past, strategic coach and industry stuff and, you know, all sorts of different things. I think they all bring a, you know, their own subset of playbooks is the perfect way to say it.
Yeah, for me, uh, both are incredible groups, and both are life changing. I mean, I actually did get my second spiritual awakening in part because of Genius Network. Uh, Two different people in Genius Network, actually two different couples in Genius Network, that said certain things to me, suggested certain my books or videos, or um, you know, it said something in an interview that changed me and led to an awakening. So, but the thing that we always need to remember is this is all a divine setup. It's a rigged game. So your friend in Maverick, she was like a soul contract with you, to you and she had a soul contract before you even incarnated, like, hey, I'm going to show up and you better pay attention when I give this recommendation to you. And I'm just going to show up in just some random group that we're both in, that we both happen to be in, but I'm waiting on the sidelines for the right moment to enter the scene in the movie, in your movie. I'm going to tell you about this book and you better read it.
Yeah. And lucky you, I'm going to show up 5 different
Because
times. And
you're kind of a slow learner sometimes.
thick. I like to say I'm thick. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, you know, it's funny as I think about, I told Mackenzie's story, that Stephen Kotler connection came through Genius Network. So, you know, here's a business group that literally the single most important, you know, piece of information I've ever accumulated came from that. I mean, saved our daughter's life, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Like she was not going to be with us if we didn't intervene the way that we did. And you know, from Genius Network, like who would connect those dots?
Well, again, it's a
So
divine setup where it doesn't matter where it comes from
yeah,
because it's meant to be. It's written into the story, into your movie.
you just have to, I think, realize or recognize when action's required and when, you know, passivity is required. So, but yeah, you and I are pretty aligned on that
Yeah.
concept.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you sharing with such candor and vulnerability and authenticity and and love and grace that you know you're really sharing from the heart, and that's special, and it's not to be taken for granted. I don't take it for granted. I know many of my listeners will not take it for granted. They will really appreciate hearing this incredible set of stories. And yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
also grateful to God for, you know, saving you and saving your daughter, and you know, showering you with all the blessings that you've gotten. You're special, and you know, you deserve it. You deserve that special attention from the heavens.
thank you. Yeah, we have some work to do in the world now to pay that forward. So
Yeah.
we're on it. And that actually, and this is probably a perfect close. You know, we look at, and Mackenzie went to hell and back. many times on her journey. And yeah, it's got, it's certainly not the ending, but it's at a very happy moment in time. And I think she really, like, had she not been on the path that she's on, she was doing amazing things in the world, but she will be a resource for young women in a way that, none of us can even comprehend, based on the fact that, she took her path with grace and elegance, and found the gifts in the worst days of all, and now wants to help other young women on their path. So, you're right. From a divine perspective, you can't say it much more succinctly, I think, than that.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, listener. It's a better world because you guys are in it. We'll catch you in the next episode. Have a fantastic week. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you want to hear more conversations like this on finding purpose in life's challenges, then I recommend episode 390 with Amberly Lago, episode 436 with James Goulden, and episode 506 with Will Henschel. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with John Ratliff at getyourselfoptimized.com/516. If you enjoyed the conversation, I encourage you to share this episode and, more importantly, the entire show, Get Yourself Optimized, with a friend. Change your life and help me spread the light. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Get Yourself Optimized. Nearly a decade ago, I started a journey that completely transformed my personal life and my business. Now I'm taking on a very select number of high-caliber coaching clients and personally helping them optimize their lives. I have limited spots, so if you're interested, go now to getyourselfoptimized.com and apply for one-on-one coaching or for our high-level mastermind. By the way, if you have any questions or comments whatsoever, email me at host@getyourselfoptimized.com. See you next week.